sure. Let me bring in Amy Holmes, anchor of Real News with The Blaze and former speechwriter for Bill Frist. Zerlina Maxwell is a political analyst and Griot.com contributor. And let me start by playing something from Lindsey Graham this morning on what the president needs to do.
I hope the president will address the American people, not just Lindsey and John, and talk about, does it really matter if Assad's in power a year from now? Are the Iranians really watching what we're doing? If he doesn't engage and persuade the American people, this vote is going to be too close to call right now. And if we lost this vote, oh my God, I can only imagine how it would make us look throughout the world.
Amy, engage and persuade. Put on your hat as a speechwriter. Does the president need to address the American people more than he has?
He most certainly does, and polling has consistently shown an overwhelming majority of Americans oppose military intervention in Syria.
So a formal Oval Office speech?
I'm not sure about a formal speech at this point, but certainly he needs to explain why this is in our national security interest. When he mentioned this isn't Iraq, it's not Afghanistan, it can't be Libya either, where the president did put our military forces to use in Libya to protect, quote unquote, the citizens of Benghazi. Well, we saw what happened in Benghazi. It became a terrorist nest and resulted in the death of our ambassador and 3 other brave Americans. So the president has an uphill climb. He hasn't really even started in the first few steps, I would say.
What do you think? Should the president, what can he do? Does he need to sit in the Oval Office and say, this is why we need to do this? How does he communicate to the American people?
I mean, I think that would be a good place to start, because I think, you know, in the intro, they're talking about a war-weary nation. That is absolutely true. And I think that you have to explain to the American people that this is not simply just about America's credibility, because that really is more of a media narrative. This is really about chemical weapons and the use of them being against international norms. And a response needs to be convincing to the American people that, you know, bombing Syria is the appropriate way to deal with the use of chemical weapons.
Well, I think that, you know, if you look at the statutes, it's a war crime to use chemical weapons against your own people. Having said that, it doesn't need to be...
It's also a crime to slaughter 100,000 Syrians in the civil war.
Right.
Talking about the strategy that the president...
And to send people running from their homes.
Sure, and to talk about the strategy that the president should pursue, first of all, they need to get their story straight. We had the Secretary of State last Friday talking about how this was urgent and immediate, and we need an immediate response, and the president contradicts him only a day later from the Rose Garden. So I think he needs to get his surrogates on board with the message of why this is in America's national security interest. And then before the big vote in Congress, and as Lindsey Graham says, if it goes against the president, that is a huge black eye to the president, his credibility, and to America's credibility, frankly. And then that, I think, is perhaps where he would give the Oval Office speech.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In a recent Gallup poll, 51% of the American people don't think Afghanistan was a mistake. We talk about a war-weary public, but that was 9/11.
Right.
That was Osama bin Laden. We have a very different
attack on America.
That's right. Very different circumstance here to try to convince the American people that this is in our best interest.
Right, and also I feel like this is putting out forest fire with more fire. Why is bombing a country, and they know we're going to do this, why is that the appropriate response? That's what the president needs to communicate to the American people, because I think most people with common sense don't see why that is the logical next step and the appropriate way to handle this.
And the way he's handled it has been so incoherent. First we have the drums of war, you know, growing louder and louder, and then now we have, well, we can take our time, a week, a month, it doesn't really matter. Well, I think Bashar al-Assad thinks it matters.
Well, there will be people who also would say, if you look at the polls, the majority of the American people want him to consult with Congress first, and so there's also that. Amy Holmes, Zerlina Maxwell, to be continued for sure. Thanks to both of you for coming in. And we'll be right back after the break.